You begin the slow, reluctant process of taking off your outer layers. It's not that you want to. Every instinct in your body says keep them on. Cling to every ounce of warmth, like a miser guarding the last coin in a frozen bank vault. But beneath those heavy sealskin mittens and oil-slicked canvas layers is the damp truth. Your clothes are soaked with sweat, snowmelt, and despair. And if you sleep in them again tonight, you might as well spoon with a glacier. The tent is cramped. You crouch in the shared canvas shell with 3 other men, all trying to peel out of layers that froze solid in the 5 minutes it took to stumble from the sled to camp. Your breath hangs in front of your face in visible puffs. Every metal button you touch burns like frostbitten fire. You don't so much undress as negotiate a reluctant truce with each article of clothing. The outer coat resists you like a sulky child. The mittens come off last, so your fingers can at least maintain some semblance of coordination before the real pain starts. Every movement is accompanied by that quiet chorus of teeth chattering, leather creaking, and distant gusts of wind howling just outside the canvas. Your base layer clings to you with all the love of a wet sponge left on a snowbank. You strip it off in stiff, jerky motions, trying not to scream as the cold air kisses your bare skin. Kisses is generous. It bites. You glance around and see the others doing the same. One man's undershirt audibly cracks as he folds it. Another is trying to pry off his boots with a stick, having given up on the laces hours ago. Nobody talks much during undressing. There's nothing to say. Just a quiet, shared knowledge that this is the worst part of the night. Except maybe the dreams about warm baths that never existed. You fumble in your pack for the driest of your spare clothes, which is to say, the least icy. You hold them up and see a faint halo of frost. Close enough. You jam one leg in, then the other. The pants resist, they always do, and you wobble, nearly falling over onto your sleeping mat, which is slightly warmer than the floor, if only because someone else's body heat was on it an hour ago. At last, you are technically undressed and redressed, though nothing about the situation feels resolved. The fresh socks, knitted by someone's long-forgotten aunt back in Portsmouth, are dry enough to wear but rough as sandpaper. They itch like guilt, but at least they're not frozen, yet. A small miracle. Your underlayers have no visible ice. You pull your blanket around your shoulders and curl inward like a fossil waiting to be discovered. Outside, the wind screams. Inside, you try to forget that tomorrow night you'll have to do this all over again. You eye the socks with deep suspicion. They're not clothing anymore. They're weapons. Curled up like little gray caterpillars, each one stiff with a crust of ice, they sit where you left them by the tent flap hours ago, when the sun was still pretending to exist. Now they're frozen in time, in shape, and possibly in spirit. You stretch a hand toward them, and even through your glove, you feel the chill radiating off them, like they're plotting something. You know what's coming, and still, you pick them up. The sock crunches in your hand. That's never a good sign for something meant to be soft. You rub it between your palms, hoping friction will revive it. But all you get is a powdering of frost and a faint puff of regret. You could sleep barefoot. You've thought about it. Some men do. But they're usually the ones who end up with blackened toes and a long boat ride home, carried out like wrapped mummies. So no, socks it is. Your feet are already in agony. They've been imprisoned in boots for the last 14 hours. Boots lined with sweat, with snow, with something you suspect is fish oil, but might just be a shared hallucination. You peeled them off moments ago, only to reveal feet that are numb in patches and sting like needles in others. There's a place just under your left pinky toe that feels like it's vibrating, but only when you look at it. You brace yourself and slide the first sock on. The outer rim touches your toes like a cold slap. Your skin rebels instantly. It's not the kind of pain that makes you scream. It's worse. It's the dull, creeping pain that whispers, "You've made a mistake." The sock gets about halfway up before catching on your swollen heel. You grit your teeth and push harder. There's a pop, not from the sock, but from somewhere in your foot, and the thing finally goes on. You sit still for a moment, clutching your foot like it's a baby bird you just dropped. Then the pins and needles begin. Tiny armies of them, marching up from your heel to your shin, poking your nerves awake in the cruelest way possible. You try not to yell. The others are dealing with their own sock-based trauma. One man is swearing under his breath in 3 languages. Another has taken to biting his glove in frustration. You consider the second sock with the respect due a worthy adversary. This one has frozen in a twist, like some cruel artist's rendering of what not to wear. You flatten it between your hands, blow on it like it's a dandelion, and prepare for round 2. This time, you try a different angle. Toes first, then roll it on like a pastry shell. Somehow it works. Your feet are now technically socked. They feel worse. The wet heat from your body starts thawing the ice, which then soaks into your skin. You lie back and try to focus on the ceiling of the tent, its fluttering canvas, its tiny holes of starlight. And you wonder why you ever thought this expedition was a good idea. You don't realize how low morale can sink until it starts scratching from underneath. Out here, in the eerie endlessness of Arctic dusk, morale doesn't crash. It erodes grain by grain. At first, it's the missed letters from home. Then the blandness of tinned food. Then the way your tent flap doesn't quite close anymore, and snow keeps sneaking in like it's paying rent. But the real shift comes on day 43, when you hear someone sigh while chewing. That's when you know the emotional floorboards are rotting. Nobody says it out loud. There's no dramatic declaration of despair. It's quieter than that. You notice fewer jokes around dinner time. You hear more staring. That's right, hearing the act of staring. Eyeballs scraping across empty space. You see men blinking slowly, like their thoughts are stuck in the snowdrifts just outside. Even the guy who used to hum sea shanties while scrubbing pans has stopped. Now he just wipes, silently, like he's cleaning his memories. Morale starts to warp perception. One guy swears the horizon moved. Another claims he saw a goose flying in circles, singing a lullaby. No one laughs. Even you want to believe it's true, because anything new, even a hallucinated goose, would be better than this stale despair. You haven't seen a fresh color in weeks. Everything is white, gray, or some variant of brown, best not investigated too closely. And then, just when it couldn't get worse, it does. That's when someone drops the sugar tin into the snow and forgets to close it. By the time it's found, it's full of slush and gravel. You watch a grown man tear up over it. The group mourns the sugar like a fallen comrade. For hours afterward, no one speaks. There are only the muffled sounds of boots being yanked off and wet wool being arranged into vaguely human bundles. But humans are strange creatures. And when morale hits bedrock, it doesn't just stay there. It starts digging. You find new ways to cope. Someone carves a tiny chess set out of biscuit crumbs and leftover buttons. Another man crafts a puppet using a sock, 2 coal bits, and a sad mustache drawn in lamp soot. You name it Captain Whiskers, and pretend it's in charge of the expedition now. Captain Whiskers gives nightly weather forecasts, which are always the same. Bleak, with a high chance of frostbite. There's something oddly comforting in this collapse of formality. With nothing left to lose, you all become weird together. You begin rating each other's snoring like it's an Olympic event. You invent new bedtime rituals like dramatic readings of old inventory logs. 6 pounds of dried peas. Gasp! One night, you even find yourself giggling. Actual giggling. Like someone cracked your shell and let a bit of warmth leak out. This isn't morale bouncing back. This is morale mutating, becoming stranger, more resilient, more absurd. Because when the world turns frozen and grey, sometimes all you can do is build a snowman and name it your therapist. You become good at lying. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind that gets recorded in history books, but the small, steady kind that keeps people upright. You learn how to smile without joy and nod without belief. It's a survival skill, really. Because out here, in this white silence that swallows sound and hope, showing fear is like lighting a match in a powder tent. It catches faster than you expect, and it spreads before you can stomp it out. So you fake it. You wake up groaning, but make it sound like a morning stretch. You joke that the ice in your socks is refreshing. You say things like, "Only 23 more days until we spot a seal," even though you haven't seen movement in any direction since the last guy fell through the ice chasing a shadow. You laugh at your own jokes. The others don't have to. Your job is just to offer the illusion that something is still okay. The captain's good at it too. He walks with purpose, even when he doesn't know where he's walking. He taps the barometer and nods as if it told him good news, though the needle hasn't moved in 3 days. He sharpens pencils that don't need sharpening. That's his tell. When he's nervous, he polishes things. You watch him one night rubbing the compass with a scrap of linen until it gleams like a beacon of misplaced optimism. Even meals become theater. You sit in a circle, chewing on whatever combination of fat, flour, and salt the cook has managed to disguise as stew. Everyone pretends it tastes fine. Someone says, "Tastes like my mother's cooking." No one asks questions. It's understood. Mother's meals are distant myths, untouchable and comforting in their unreality. You all nod, imagining dinners that never needed unfreezing. At bedtime, the performance continues. You unzip your sleeping roll with exaggerated care, as if settling into a hotel suite. Someone grunts appreciatively. You add, 5 stars, except for the frostbitten footrest. It gets a chuckle. A weak one, but it's there. These tiny jokes become the glue that holds the night together, because the alternative is silence, and silence in the Arctic isn't peace. It's pressure. It grows heavy, like a second blanket you didn't ask for. Even when your fingers throb and your teeth chatter, you keep your tone light. "Bit nippy tonight, eh?" You say it like you're discussing the weather at a cricket match, not sitting in a wind-torn canvas cocoon wondering if your big toe is still attached. This sort of casual commentary becomes ritual. The others mimic it, or at least tolerate it. That's enough. Historians still argue whether this kind of optimism was genuine leadership or just a necessary illusion. Some diaries suggest the captains believed their own performances. Others hint they knew it was theater. Either way, the effect was real. The men got up, got dressed, boiled ice into water, and didn't stab each other with spoons. Most nights that counted as victory. Pretending everything is fine doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means placing a small, polite curtain between you and the abyss, just enough to dim the view. You crouch low in the tent, fingers trembling as you fumble with the flint. Your breath clouds your vision, and you blink to clear it, squinting at the stubby wick dunked in a pool of whale oil. The lamp smells like a butcher shop on a hot day, or at least what you imagine that smells like. You haven't been warm in weeks, but somehow the oil still manages to reek. Lighting it is tonight's first real challenge, and the stakes are oddly high. Without it, there's no warmth, no light, no chance at comfort. With it, there's also a real chance you'll light yourself on fire. The gloves don't help. Thick, stiff, and crusted with a fine layer of everything they've touched in the last 2 months. They're more like oven mitts made of wet cardboard. You'd take them off, but last time you did that, your fingers turned pale gray and didn't move right for a while. So you make do. You grip the flint with your left hand and strike down hard with the steel striker, sending a tiny spark toward the greasy cotton wick. It fizzles out. Your tent mate sighs dramatically from the corner. You ignore him. This is delicate work. Whale oil doesn't just burst into flame, thankfully. It takes coaxing, patience, a steady hand, none of which you currently possess. You try again. A spark lands, sputters, and, miracle of miracles, catches. The flame is small and pathetic at first, just a trembling orange flicker. But it grows. It begins to lick at the curled lip of the tin lamp, casting shadows that dance on the canvas like drunken ghosts. You feel a swell of accomplishment entirely out of proportion with the task. It's just a lamp, but it means you won't freeze entirely tonight. That's something. Now comes the hard part, adjusting the wick. If it's too low, the flame will die. Too high, and you'll blacken the tent with soot or set your sleeping roll ablaze. You pull out the little brass key and twist it, the mechanism groaning like it hasn't been used in a decade. The flame responds, taller now, a bit steadier. You lean back, but not too far. Last week, someone's hood caught fire doing this. The whole tent smelled like singed wool for days. The light illuminates the faces around you. Everyone looks 100 years old. The man nearest you blinks slowly, his beard flecked with ice and crumbs. You pass him the second lamp. It's his turn to play Arctic matchmaker. There's a rhythm to this now, a nightly ritual, lamp lighting as ceremony, as meditation, as hope. No one talks until the lamps are burning properly. Words only come after the glow returns to the tent, warming cheeks and lifting shoulders. It's as if the lamps don't just light the room, they light the mood. You rub your gloves together near the warmth, careful not to touch the flame. You've survived the whale oil gauntlet one more time, with all your fingers, and most of your dignity, intact. The blanket doesn't fold anymore. It creases, crunches, and cracks like a sheet of stale pastry. You pull it up over your knees and feel the sharp chill of old sweat that never quite dried. It smells like every night you've spent on this expedition, bitter, familiar, and strangely comforting in a way you'd never admit aloud. It's not so much a blanket anymore as it is a soft relic of collective suffering. Everyone has one. Issued at the start. Stamped with some supply clerk's fading initials and a number you no longer remember the significance of. Yours is darker along the edges, stained where your breath condenses and freezes, and melts and freezes again. It's been frozen in a dozen different ways. Rain that turned to ice, snow that melted during sleep, a spilled mug of something that used to be hot. The result is a patchwork of frost and flannel that fights back when you try to wrap it around your shoulders. Lying beneath it, you don't warm up. You just stop losing heat quite as fast. That's the bar now. You feel the moisture inside the blanket first. Damp. Always damp. Like the blanket is constantly exhaling against your body. The warmth of your torso briefly awakens old sweat trapped deep in the fibers, and for one glorious second, it almost feels cozy. Then the outer layer stays cold, and you remember why you stopped trusting it. Every man handles his blanket differently, Some fold it once and press it down tightly, like they're swaddling themselves against mortality. Others lay it loose and lumpy, hoping air pockets might magically provide insulation. The guy 2 spots over insists on shaking his out each night like it's some sacred rite, even though the shaking inevitably sends a powdery frost cloud into everyone's faces. No one has the energy to argue. There are nights the blanket feels heavier than it is. That's when you've had the bad dreams, the ones where you're home again, warm again, but then realize it was just your brain playing old reels. You wake up, and the blanket's still there, stiff and unloving, clinging to you like a second skin made of discomfort. It's hard to tell whether it smells more like wet wool or fear. The worst part is the middle, the part that always folds over your stomach. That's where all the condensation gathers, pooling silently in your sleep until it stiffens into a crust that cracks when you shift. You stop shifting after a while, not because you're comfortable, because it isn't worth the sound. Historians still debate how explorers managed to sleep at all under such conditions. Some argue they didn't. They merely passed out from exhaustion. Others suggest they trained their minds to ignore the cold, to focus inward. But you suspect the truth is simpler. Eventually, the body just gives up. It accepts the cold, the damp, the dreams. And in that surrender, you drift off. Tonight, as you tuck the crunchy edge beneath your chin, you whisper goodnight to no one in particular. The blanket doesn't answer, but it stays. You learn quickly that warmth is not a state, it's a currency. And out here, in the middle of nowhere and the belly of forever winter, it's the rarest thing you can trade. You don't just share it, you guard it, you negotiate with it, and when necessary, you hoard it like a miser. Warmth isn't found in roaring fires or hot baths. It's found in a gulp of steam rising from your tea tin before it freezes. It's in the puff of breath that lingers near your scarf for one brief second before the air devours it. Every man rations warmth differently. Some keep hot stones under their armpits, borrowed from the evening's fire if there was one, heated just enough not to scald. Others layer their shirts inside out and then right side out again, convinced it traps heat better. There's a man in your tent who swears by wrapping his wool socks around his neck at night. Not for fashion, but because it's the only thing that keeps his ears from feeling like glass. You all have your own strategies, passed around like secret codes. Someone suggests stuffing spare mittens into your chest pocket, close to your heart. Another says you should always sleep curled tight like a nesting bird. But the best trick? Shared body heat. That's when the negotiations begin. Because sharing body heat means sharing space, and smells and snores, and secrets no one meant to say out loud. So warmth becomes a social contract, a fragile one. You and your tent mates start rating proximity on a sliding scale. 1 is polite distance, 2 is shared blanket edge, 3 is a full body press with no apologies. The cold dictates everything. There are no politics when your teeth are chattering so hard they feel loose. Food becomes another way to store warmth. You gulp the stew while it's still scalding, burning your tongue on purpose. It's worth it to feel heat slide down your throat like a sunbeam. You wrap your fingers around your tin cup, even when it's empty, just to pretend. The heat of a potato, long since eaten, lingers in your palm as memory. When someone opens the tent flap at night, warmth escapes like a ghost. Everyone groans. You'd think it was gold flying out. Blankets get clutched tighter, hats tugged down. The offender is silently shunned for at least an hour, because warmth is earned, hoarded, and not to be squandered on casual exits. Historians still argue how much warmth explorers actually had access to. Some records describe roaring fires, but most mention smoke holes and damp wood, and embers that refuse to catch. Some say men survive through sheer grit. Others whisper about subtle ways crews rotated shifts near the fire, 10 minutes per man, like borrowing time from the sun. But what you know, here in this tent, is that warmth never arrives in bulk. It comes in flickers, in shared breath, in the weight of another man's elbow against yours. And tonight, as you press your sock-wrapped hands against your ribs, you pretend you're rich. The Arctic doesn't smell like snow. Snow doesn't have a scent. What does have a scent, an unmistakable, inescapable one, is you. You, your crewmates, the sealskin tent, and every object inside it that has soaked up the essence of unwashed bodies, boiled blubber, and something that vaguely resembles dog breath but stronger. The air is thick, despite the cold. It's not the kind of stink that makes you gag. It's worse. It's the kind that clings. You don't even notice it anymore until something reminds you, like a breeze from a newly opened tent flap, that your world has become one long exhale of survival funk. Start with the oil. Whale oil, to be specific. The lamps run on it. The sleds are greased with it. Some desperate soul even tried using it on cracked lips once. It smells like fish, smoke, and something ancient that should have stayed buried. The lamps sputter out oily soot, and it settles on your skin like dark dandruff. When you scratch your scalp at night, black dust falls onto your blanket. You've stopped wondering whether that's healthy. Then there's the wool. Wool is your best friend and worst enemy. It keeps you from freezing. It also keeps every ounce of sweat, every droplet of seal stew, every trace of bodily panic when the latrine tent collapses mid-use. Your shirt is less a garment now, and more a sponge of bad decisions. You try not to think about it as you curl into yourself, feeling the stiffness where your sleeves used to bend. The dogs don't help. They're loyal, resilient, and deeply unhygienic. Their fur sheds in clumps, sticking to blankets and boots alike. And they have a specific musk, wet fur mixed with frozen meat and old snow, that can make you nostalgic for the scent of dirty socks. One of them, Buster, sleeps by your feet sometimes. He snores and twitches, and when he does, a small cloud of warm stink puffs out from under your blanket. It's a reminder that he too is trying to survive. Some men try to fight it. There's a guy in your group who insists on splashing his face every morning with snow, scrubbing at his cheeks with the enthusiasm of a man trying to forget a former life. It doesn't help. All it does is wake him up and make the rest of you resentful. There's no such thing as fresh air in a shared tent of explorers. Just air that hasn't been stirred in the last half hour. You all pretend not to notice, because noticing would mean acknowledging how low the standards have sunk. Someone picks up a boot and sniffs it, shrugs and puts it on. Another farts, apologizes once, and then carries on eating. These things used to be shameful. Now they're part of the ambient environment, like the wind or the snow or the slow creaking of canvas. Historians still debate how much explorers suffered from poor hygiene. Diaries mention chronic odors and inexplicable dampness, but the true bouquet of an Arctic camp has likely been mercifully lost to time. Lucky time. Tonight, you roll onto your side, breathing shallowly, and pull your rancid blanket up to your nose. It smells like blubber, burnt wool, and loyal dog. It smells like life. You sit cross-legged in your sleeping roll, clutching a tin the size of a biscuit. It rattles faintly when shaken. Inside, a mix of chalky powder and mint oil clings to the rim like ancient dust. It's your tooth powder. one of the few items you brought that still vaguely resembles something from civilization. Every man has his own version, though not everyone still bothers to use it. You, however, cling to this small ritual, not because it works particularly well, but because it's one of the last things you do that still feels normal. The powder itself tastes like peppermint and crushed sidewalk. It's gritty. It makes your gums sting a little. But that sensation is oddly welcome. It reminds you that your teeth, despite the cold and the diet of salted meat, are still in your head and more or less intact. You take a deep breath through your nose, regretting it instantly as the tent air brings in a wall of dog breath and wool must. Your toothbrush is a battered affair. Technically, it was new when the expedition left England, back when things like grooming supplies were packed with the same care as navigation charts. Now the bristles are flared out in all directions, like the tail of a startled squirrel. It still works, sort of. You wet it with snow melt, dip it into the tin, and begin scrubbing. You do this quickly. Arctic brushing is not a luxury activity. The brush stiffens between strokes, and the paste foams into a slurry that quickly freezes at the corners of your mouth. You wipe it away with the sleeve of your shirt, which now has a permanent stripe of gritty gray just below the elbow. Nobody judges. Everyone's sleeves look the same. Around you, the others either ignore your effort or watch in bemused silence. One man mutters that brushing your teeth is pointless out here. Another claims the cold preserves your teeth naturally, like a frozen museum. You don't respond. You just keep brushing, even as your lips crack from the motion. There's something calming in the rhythm. Scrub, dip, scrub again. It's a moment of routine in a world where nothing else follows rules. Out here, your boots freeze, your blankets fight you, and the sky never changes. But this 2-minute scrape of brush on enamel, this is yours. Historians still argue whether Arctic hygiene practices had any long-term benefit. Some journals praise the discipline. Others describe mouths so foul the dogs backed away. Some speculate that brushing was a psychological anchor more than a medical necessity. Whatever the truth, for you, it's a tether to home, to evenings in warm rooms with glass mirrors and running water, and a mother who once scolded you for skipping your molars. You spit discreetly into a corner of the tent, where the foam instantly freezes in a little white clump. Then you close the tin, wipe the brush with a piece of cloth stiff from old paste, and nod once to yourself. Your teeth may still fall out by spring, but for tonight, they're clean. That's something. You examine the tin with grim affection. Tonight's flavor, boiled beef, again. Though calling it beef might be generous. Whatever creature was ground, brined, and sealed into this metal can probably died confused. The label is long gone, peeled off in the damp weeks ago. So now, it's a surprise every time you open one. Surprise being a strong word, since the meat inside always tastes roughly the same. Salty, fibrous, and faintly reminiscent of rope. You tap the tin with the back of your spoon. That's part of the ritual. One of your crewmates claims the vibrations wake up the flavor. He's joking. Probably. Still, you do it. Any form of interaction with food before eating it feels like a psychological warm-up, preparing your jaw and your pride for the coming ordeal. Your jaw cracks audibly as you take the first bite. You chew slowly, methodically, like you're trying to remember how your teeth work. Most of them do. Most. One molar on the right side went soft in November, and another is only good for mashing peas, which you haven't seen in 3 weeks. So you chew on the left, rotating the meat like it's a stubborn knot you're trying to unravel with your face. The meat fights back. It always does. It was boiled once, then boiled again, then sealed in a tin, and stacked on a ship that crossed the Atlantic. Whatever tenderness it once had is now theoretical. You chew, swallow, and chew again because sometimes it doesn't go down the first time. One bite takes effort. 2 bites take commitment. By the 3rd, you've started questioning your life choices. Still, there's something satisfying about it. A kind of primal achievement. You're conquering something. Maybe not the Arctic, but at least this particular chunk of unidentifiable protein. Around the tent, the sounds of similar chewing echo in quiet rhythm. A symphony of strained jaws and muffled sighs. One man sprinkles crushed biscuit crumbs over his meat like seasoning. Another stirs in melted snow to make a gravy. The culinary bar is low, but creativity survives. You all pretend this is fine. You talk about favorite meals from home. Steaks, pies, sausages wrapped in bacon. You do this while chewing, as if discussing real food might conjure its ghost. It doesn't. But it keeps your spirits slightly above freezing. Historians still discuss how these early expeditions handled nutrition. Official logs mention salted meats, pemmican, and hard tack. But diaries hint at more desperate measures, stewing boot leather, chewing candle ends. Some argue that the worst part of Arctic rations wasn't the shortage, but the sheer monotony. A man can only eat the same salted lump so many times before he starts dreaming in gravy. You lick your spoon clean and scrape the tin for stragglers. There's always one stubborn shred hiding near the seam. You fish it out triumphantly, chew, and decide it's probably tendon. You don't care. It's calories. You've done more with less. And tomorrow, when another tin presents itself, be it beef, pork, or surprise, you'll chew again. With whatever teeth remain. You peel off your boots like you're unwrapping a cursed artifact. The sound they make is somewhere between a squelch and a gasp. It's as if your boots themselves are begging for mercy. Inside, your socks have become an unholy marriage of sweat, melted snow, and time. You brace yourself, reach in and pull. Or try to. The sock clings. It clings with the tenacity of regret. Eventually it comes loose, but not in one piece. The heel stays behind, glued to your foot. The toe disintegrates in your hand like old parchment. You stare at the limp, wet fragments and feel a dull sorrow bloom in your chest. These socks were once whole. They were part of a care package, knitted with love and optimism by someone who believed you'd wear them proudly on brave adventures. Now, they resemble used bandages from a battlefield no one won. Your feet underneath don't look much better. The skin is pale and wrinkled, more prune than person. There are red marks where the wool bunched up. The toenail on your second toe is dark. You hope it's just bruised. You wiggle your toes. They respond slowly, reluctantly, like they've been asleep for days and are grumpy about waking up. The tent smells worse once the boots come off. Everyone knows it. No one says it. There's a shared silence, a mutual pact of olfactory tolerance. You lay your damp socks near the flap, not in the hope they'll dry. No, those days are long gone, but so they won't freeze into new and creative shapes before morning. You once saw a man's sock freeze mid-air. He was waving it dry, and it stayed that way, half a swing, like a sad woolen flag. You reach for your spare pair, knowing full well they're also damp. Dry is a relative concept now. They're less damp, and that's enough. You tug them on, wincing as cold cotton touches skin already rubbed raw. It feels like dipping your feet in slush flavored with regret. But it's better than nothing. Out here, that phrase carries a lot of weight. There's a moment each night when everyone sits silently with their bare feet exposed. No jokes. No chatter. Just a row of men studying their toes, like fortune tellers reading tea leaves. Blisters are compared. Missing skin is silently acknowledged. The man with the black spot on his heel covers it quickly. No one asks. Because out here, noticing too much can feel like a curse. Historians still debate the true toll Trenchfoot took on Arctic expeditions. Some journals speak clinically of flesh loss and sloughing tissue, while others describe feet wrapped in cloth so thick they resembled hooves. One medical officer wrote, "We measure men's fortitude now by the condition of their socks." You believe him. Tonight you lay back, your new socks slowly warming against your feet, and remind yourself, tomorrow you'll rotate your boots near the lamp. You won't forget this time. Because in the cold, your feet don't just carry you. They betray you if you don't treat them right. You hold the tin basin like it's a philosophical question. It contains water, barely thawed from snow scraped in handfuls from the tent's edge, and now you're trying to decide if touching it to your face counts as hygiene or self-harm. The water stares back, calm and unbothered by your dilemma. You stare at your own reflection, distorted and twitching. You're pretty sure your eyebrows are frozen into two tiny icicle hedges. The act of washing out here is not about cleanliness. It's about identity. A final shred of defiance against the ever-creeping Arctic filth. But to get clean, you must get colder. That's the terrible paradox. You must strip off your gloves, dip your fingers into glacial liquid, and willingly dab it onto your already abused skin. That moment before the first splash is the worst. You hesitate again. Someone behind you coughs and mutters, "Just throw it at your face like the rest of us." But you don't. Not yet. You've made it this far, and this is your nightly negotiation with sanity. So you dip a rag, once white, now just tent-colored, into the water. It absorbs slowly, reluctantly, like it knows better. You wring it once, wince at the sting in your hands, then begin. The water hits your cheek like a slap from Neptune himself. Cold, commanding, and not entirely personal. It's just physics. Your skin goes red instantly. You wipe in slow circles, clearing away the soot, the oil, and the crusted edge of something you're not going to investigate too closely. Your forehead throbs, your ears shriek, but a part of you, stubborn and human, feels awake. Some men skip the ritual entirely. One uses snow instead, rubbing it over his cheeks like a deranged spa treatment. He claims it exfoliates. He also hasn't blinked in 3 days, so take that with caution. Another dabs himself with whiskey on a rag. The smell's strong enough to make everyone think he's drinking it, which results in an awkward intervention. It turns out he was just trying to smell like anything else. You finish with your neck, holding your breath. It's one thing to wash your face, another entirely to expose the jugular to Arctic air. It feels like inviting death in for a polite chat. You pull your scarf back up immediately after, tucking it into the layers of your shirt like it's armor. There's a towel somewhere in your pack, but it's stiff with old moisture. You use the dry corner of your shirt instead, patting yourself down with the efficiency of a man who regrets all his choices. Then you toss the rag back into the basin, where the water is already starting to crust at the edges again. Historians still argue about how often explorers really washed. Some claim daily routines were maintained even in blizzards. Others say hygiene was abandoned early, traded for warmth and sanity. But here and now you've done it. You washed, a little, and as your skin tingles and steams in the frigid air, you feel it, just barely, that sense that you're still yourself underneath the soot and wool, that maybe you haven't turned entirely into a crusty snow creature yet. You lie down for the night, but there's no such thing as personal space here. The tent is narrow, low, and crammed with sleeping bodies packed tighter than biscuits in a tin. You roll onto your side, carefully, cautiously, trying not to elbow the man next to you, who is already snoring like a saw through frozen timber. On your other side, someone lets out a soft wheeze. The stew is working its dark magic. There's no right way to lie in this configuration. You start on your left, but your hip finds a rock through the mat. You switch to your right, but your neighbor's elbow is already there, acting as if your ribs were a good resting shelf. Flat on your back is worse. The ceiling hangs too low, and you can feel the warmth of 5 other chests all exhaling toward your face. It's like breathing inside someone else's sweater. The stew from dinner was a mistake. Not in taste. No one even remembers what flavor it claimed to be, but in effect. The cook had found a tin in the back of the sled, one that had a dent and a faint hiss when opened. "Perfectly fine," he said. Everyone ate it. Everyone now regrets it. The tent is filled with a quiet chorus of stomachs gurgling in protest. There is a vague tension, like everyone's trying not to be the first to break the truce. And then someone does. A low, unmistakable sound emerges from the far end of the tent. No one moves. No one speaks. A beat of silence follows, then a single voice. "Wasn't me." You all know that's a lie, but you respect the courage it took to say it. You adjust your blanket, trying to create a small barrier between yourself and the inevitable. But it's a losing battle. Heat rises, but so does everything else. In a sealed tent with 6 men and 0 ventilation, what floats must linger. Some men claim they can sleep through anything. Those men haven't slept next to your tent mates. The snoring, the tossing, the subtle symphony of digestion. It's all part of the nightly routine now. You once tried using a balled-up sock as an earplug. It worked until it froze mid-night and fell out, landing squarely in your eye socket. Historians often overlook the sleeping arrangements on Arctic expeditions. Diaries mention cramped quarters and shared mats, but few capture the deeply intimate, deeply uncomfortable ballet of shared sleep. One officer once wrote, "It is not the ice, but the nearness of others that breaks a man." You understand that now, as you nestle deeper into your half-frozen blanket, you try to focus on anything else. On home, on warm beds, on rooms with actual corners and actual silence. You shift again, elbow grazing someone's ribs, and a groan escapes them. You whisper an apology into the dark. No one answers, but someone farts again. The first snore is subtle, almost a purr. You think maybe it's just someone shifting, letting out a sleepy sigh. But no, it builds. It deepens. It develops a personality. Within seconds, it's no longer background noise. It's the entire soundscape. One man, somewhere to your left, has begun his nightly concert. The sound he produces is not quite human. It's a cross between a rusted hinge and an animal giving birth. Loud, nasal, inexplicably wet. You roll over and press your face into the blanket. It does nothing. The blanket is too thin, and your ears too cursed with function. The snore crescendos. Hern, hern, then stops. A pause. Silence. You hold your breath, daring to hope, but then it starts again, louder this time, as if the snorer used that break to regroup. It's not just one man. They take turns. Another starts up across the tent. This one is high-pitched and rhythmic, like a bellows being pumped by an over-enthusiastic blacksmith. For a moment, the 2 snorers fall into sync. It's impressive in a horrible way. You wonder if you should applaud or weep. You once tried plugging your ears with bits of wool. That lasted 10 minutes, until you woke up with one piece in your mouth and another frozen to your neck. One man tried wrapping his head in a scarf. He stopped when he woke up gasping like a fish. There's no winning. The snoring simply is. Like the snow. Like the regret. Of course, it's not just the sound. It's what it does to the group. You glance across the dark tent and see someone else glaring into the void, eyes wide open, jaw clenched. He sees you and raises his eyebrows in a shared language of silent suffering. Another man sighs dramatically and turns over. His blanket rustles like a grumpy thundercloud. The snoring continues, oblivious. Some nights it's funny. You joke about it the next morning, how it sounded like a walrus trying to recite poetry, or a steam engine having a personal crisis. Other nights, it's war. One guy once accidentally dropped a mitten on the worst offender's face. No one called him out. We all had motives. Historians rarely describe the acoustic nightmares of polar tents. The journals are mostly silent on this point, perhaps out of mercy. But buried in one explorer's footnotes is a line. It is difficult to maintain morale when Mr. Fellows insists on honking like a goose in heat. That, you think, feels more accurate than anything in the official reports. You try rhythmic breathing. You try counting breaths. You try imagining a waterfall, but your brain keeps replacing it with the exact tempo of the snores. The worst part? You know you snore too. Everyone does eventually. Out here, exhaustion wins. Tonight, it's their turn. Tomorrow, the walrus might be you. And with that oddly comforting thought, you pull the blanket over your head and hope for silence, or at least for sleep to arrive before the third snorer joins in. You didn't expect the Arctic to come with rules about sleep positioning, but here you are, wedged into a sleeping bag that smells like damp porridge, practicing something you've come to call expedition spooning avoidance. It's not that you don't like these men. You just don't want to accidentally become one with them in the middle of the night. The etiquette of communal sleeping evolves quickly. On day 1, you apologize every time your boot bumps someone else's elbow. By day 10, you grunt and shift. By day 30, you just quietly accept that at least one part of you will be touching at least one part of someone else until dawn. Tonight, it's your shoulder nestled against someone's shin. You're not even surprised anymore. There's an unspoken rule. No unnecessary contact below the waist. If it happens, you both pretend it didn't. Same for stray snores, sleep talking, or the occasional involuntary twitch that results in a full body flop. The man to your right has a habit of murmuring what sounds like naval commands. You've started responding under your breath, just to feel like you're part of something bigger. Then there's the blanket overlap dilemma. If your blanket ends up half on another man, what's the right move? Reclaim it. Share it? Pretend it's intentional warmth redistribution? No one wants to be the guy who hoards wool like a dragon hoards gold. But no one wants to freeze either. So you each engage in subtle blanket tug-of-war battles, mostly while pretending to be asleep. You've also learned to face outward. If everyone does it, no one ends up breathing in someone else's exhale. Except someone always forgets. There's nothing like waking up to hot breath fogging your eyebrow. You shift away slowly, like moving from a bear in the woods. One man sleeps with his knees up, which takes more room than he admits. Another insists on curling into a perfect fetal position. You've taken to sleeping straight as a plank. Not for comfort, there is none, but for predictability. The fewer surprises in the night, the better. There's also an unspoken order to who lies where. The guy with the worst farts gets the edge near the flap. The one with night terrors gets the spot least likely to be sat on during a panic. The captain always gets the middle, not because it's special, but because it's warmest. Everyone knows this. No one questions it. Historians rarely detail the choreography of shared tents, but the truth is, these arrangements weren't just about space. They were about diplomacy, about knowing when to move and when to stay still, about whispering sorry when your knee thuds into someone's side and hearing "Soke" murmured back in half-sleep. Tonight you settle in, finding the narrow groove your body has worn into the mat over countless nights. You tug your blanket gently, trying not to provoke a tug back. You lie still, breathe shallow, and listen to the quiet orchestra of a dozen men trying their best not to notice each other. The tent breathes, not in a mystical, poetic way, but in a literal, thick way. Air shifting as someone shifts in their sleep, or as a gust of wind leaks through a seam in the canvas, stirring up the invisible cloud of collective scent, like someone had shaken a snow globe of body funk. You've become fluent in these odors. They tell a story. Not one you want to hear, mind you, but one that arrives, uninvited, every single night. It starts with sweat. Not fresh sweat, which has a certain honesty to it, but old sweat, stale, soaked into wool, into tent mats, into the very soul of the sleeping bags. It has a sweetness to it, faintly vinegary, vaguely tragic. You catch it when someone shifts, releasing a puff of warmth that's been marinating between layers for hours. It's not personal. It's just there, always. Then there's the seal oil. It's in the lamps, the sled runners, the food, sometimes even on your clothes, depending on how reckless dinner was. It's cloying, fatty, unmistakable. You've dreamed about it. Not good dreams. Dreams where the scent follows you through imaginary streets back home, where it oozes from bread and rises from tea. When you wake, it's still in your nose, because it never left. The stew adds its voice next. Not the taste. Your taste buds have long since abandoned nuance. But the smell of whatever simmered over the seal oil flame that night. Beans, maybe. Fish, probably. The meat was something. The aroma lingers, infuses the canvas, and then, over time, turns. It becomes less stew, more reminder. A stale reminder of meals that aimed to be comforting and landed somewhere between edible and emotional damage. But the worst note in this nasal symphony is the feet. There's no sugarcoating it. Feet in the Arctic are a menace. Trapped in boots for 16 hours, then briefly exposed to the cold and each other, they emit a scent that defies language. If despair had a smell, it would be Arctic socks after a long march. You don't look anymore when someone peels their socks off with a wet thwick. You just avert your nose and think of lavender, or snow, or your last clean memory. Still, there's a strange kind of comfort in the familiarity. You can identify who's nearby by scent alone. The cook has a sour edge of flour and meat fat. The captain smells like pipe smoke, leather, and command. One guy smells inexplicably of onions. No one knows why. You know the rhythm of these smells now. They're not pleasant, but they're known. And in the Arctic, the known is better than the unknown every time. Historians rarely describe the smells. Photographs can show the frostbite. Journals can record the boredom, but no one preserved the stench. Perhaps it's for the best. Perhaps it's the only mercy time has granted these memories. So you lie there, eyes closed, blanket up to your chin, nose wrinkled beneath it, surrounded by odors that tell you exactly where and who you are. And weirdly, that helps you sleep. You sit up in your bedroll, balancing a journal on your knees, the little book bound in cheap leather and stiffer than usual from the cold. The corners curl, not from age or time, but from frost and breath. A stubby pencil, dulled to a sad, frozen nub, rests between your fingers. You tap it once against the page, then begin your nightly ritual, not because you expect anyone to read it, but because it's the only thing left that still feels quietly, stubbornly civilized. Writing out here is a stubborn act of defiance. Against the cold, yes, but also against the gradual erosion of your sense of self. Everything else has become strange. Meals are strange. Sleep is strange. Conversation has become a patchwork of grunts and inside jokes about snow. But your handwriting, though jerky and clawed from your half-numb fingers, is still yours. That alone is worth preserving. You write slowly, carefully, each word taking 3 times longer than it used to. It's not just the temperature, it's the gloves. Taking them off isn't an option anymore. The last man who tried that ended up with fingers so stiff they wouldn't bend in the morning. So you adapt. You adjust your grip like you're holding a bird you don't want to crush, and you press the pencil into the paper just firmly enough that it leaves a mark without snapping. Your hand cramps quickly. You stop and flex your fingers, then shake them out like a pianist preparing for a recital. It's a sad recital. One audience member, your future self. You write what you remember of the day. It doesn't always make sense. Wind constant. Tea frozen before breakfast. Buster, dog, ate half a mitten. Or morale low. Feet damp. Stared at horizon for 40 minutes. No change. Some days you wax poetic, quoting Tennyson through chattering teeth. Other times you scrawl nonsense just to feel the motion. Flap, 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 across the paper, like your brain is flapping its own little wings. You never reread what you write. Not now. Maybe when the expedition ends, if it ends, you'll look back and see whether your thoughts unraveled like thread or simply looped in place. For now, each page is a message in a bottle. Cast off. Never to return. Historians still argue about how much of Arctic exploration we truly know from first-hand accounts. So many journals were lost, buried with their owners or shredded by wind and time. Others were edited, censored, cleaned up. But the raw, personal scraps, written under whale oil lamplight by men like you, those are the heartbeat behind the grand tales of discovery. Tonight, you finish your page with a final note. Socks still damp. Stars out. No visible ice bears. Good night. You underline good twice, as if to will it into being. You close the journal, tuck it under your arm, and slide back down into the warmish hollow you've made in your bedroll. Another day survived. Another thought captured. Another sentence pushed through the frost. You used to write with ink. Real ink. The kind that flowed smoothly from a steel nib, dark and glossy and respectable. It felt proper. Felt like you were part of something official. But that was before you realized that ink in the Arctic has all the reliability of a politician in a snowstorm. Tonight, as usual, the ink bottle is solid, not thick. Not sluggish, solid. You could use it as a paperweight, if only it weren't glass and threatening to crack from the pressure. You rattle the bottle near your ear. It makes a dull, hollow clink. No slosh, no hope. You've tried warming it before. Tucking it in your armpit, wrapping it in wool, even holding it over the seal oil lamp. Not your brightest idea. All that got you was a cracked lid, a ruined sleeve, and one extremely angry tent mate who accused you of stinking up the tent with literary ambition. So you've given up on ink. Still, you keep the pen. The nib is chipped, the handle is splitting, but it's a reminder of warmer days, of desks and candles, and a place where writing didn't require hazard pay. You roll the pen between your gloved fingers now like a totem. You miss the scratching sound it used to make, the slow flow of thought to page. Instead, you've converted to pencil, if converted is the word for reluctantly surrendered. Pencils don't freeze. That's their only real virtue. They smudge, they snap, and they require sharpening with a knife so dull it recently failed to cut pemmican. But they write. That's all you can ask. You glance at the men around you. Most are asleep or pretending to be. One is scratching behind his ear with the kind of grim focus only the itchy can summon. You wait a beat, then reach into your pack and pull out the bottle again, just to check. You hold it to the light. Still frozen, still useless. Some explorers brought powdered ink meant to be mixed with warm water. But warm water is a luxury reserved for other things, like thawing boots or rehydrating jerky. There's no dignity in asking the cook for hot water for writing. You did that once. He laughed for a full minute and offered you broth instead. You tried it. Broth makes very bad ink. Historians debate how many expedition records were lost due to conditions like these. One theory suggests that entire journals were abandoned when the ink simply became dead weight. Another posits that men scribbled their thoughts on scraps of anything, mapbacks, biscuit wrappers, even tent fabric, using charcoal, grease, whatever would leave a mark. And still others argue that silence won out, that many simply stopped writing when the Arctic stopped listening. You replace the bottle carefully in your pack. You'll keep it. Not for use, but for the idea it represents. Meanwhile, your pencil scratches on, recording tonight's offering. Ink still frozen, cold, relentless, pencil splinters. But writing anyway. It's not art, but it's survival in cursive. You didn't set out to chronicle suffering. Your journal was supposed to be a record of discovery, of brave progress across uncharted tundra, of clever engineering and noble camaraderie. But page after page, night after night, what emerges isn't victory. It's damp socks, aching fingers, tasteless meals, and endless biting wind. And strangely it helps, because every time you write, "Woke up with frost in my mustache again," or "Tent collapsed during stew," or "Accidentally bit down on a frozen raisin and saw stars," you feel a tiny measure of control. A cold truth written down is still cold, but at least it's yours. No one else has to read it. Maybe no one ever will. You imagine future historians poring over your pages, raising their eyebrows at the line, "Rum ration tasted like kerosene and disappointment." But more likely, your journal will end up in a drawer, or a museum, or used to patch a hole in someone's pack. That's fine. It's not the destination, it's the ritual, and what a strange ritual it is. Each night, after everyone else settles into the symphony of creaking joints and competing snores, you dig out your stubby pencil, crack open the stiff leather cover, and begin. Some nights, it's bullet points, your fingers too cold for eloquence. Others, you ramble. Paragraphs stretch out like the horizon, unfocused, dreamy. You write about food you miss, songs you've forgotten the words to, what it felt like to see sunlight for more than an hour. You write about your tent mates, though not always kindly. One entry simply reads, "Evans again, snored into my ear, might kill him with spoon. You're not the only one." Across the camp, others have their own journals, letters, scraps of parchment. No one shares. Not really. But sometimes you catch someone smiling faintly as they write, or shaking their head in silent laughter. One night, you saw a man kiss his journal before stowing it away. Maybe he was thinking of someone. Maybe he was just happy he didn't drop it in the stew. Historians still argue about the psychological role of journaling in polar expeditions. Some claim it preserved sanity, giving structure to shapeless days. Others argue it was simply habit, something done because it was done. But in the absence of warmth, or privacy, or anything resembling normalcy, writing becomes a kind of shelter, a place where you can speak freely, even if your audience is no one at all. Tonight you write, "Left boot tore at seam, ice in both socks, no real light." Missed home more than usual. You pause, reread it, and add a final line. But I laughed when Ferguson dropped his tea into his lap. That was something. It's enough. You close the book, your hand aching. The misery hasn't lifted, but it's been acknowledged. Named. That makes it smaller. That makes it bearable. And out here, in the middle of nowhere, bearing it is everything. There are only so many ways you can write, "Everything is terrible," before it starts sounding repetitive, even to yourself. So you, like many others before you, learn to disguise your misery. You invent metaphors. You turn despair into inside jokes. You develop a quiet little code between yourself and the pages of your journal. It's not for secrecy. It's for dignity. Take the phrase, "Captain was in good form today." That never means he was cheerful. It means he barked at someone for misplacing the compass and spent 15 minutes staring at a snowdrift like it owed him money. Rations were ample usually translates to, "We got extra biscuit crumbs after one fell into the stew." And when you write, "Evans remains consistent," you absolutely mean he's still the worst tent mate in history. The others do it too. You've seen their entries in moments when privacy collapses, wind blowing open a notebook, someone forgetting to pack theirs away. The tone is always the same, dry, understated, painfully British, even among non-Brits. One man described a near-disastrous sled tumble as an unexpected adjustment in altitude. Another wrote that his boots were resistant to progress. You admired that one for days. There's something comforting in this coded shorthand. It allows you to vent without shouting, to complain without sounding ungrateful, to express utter despair with the elegance of a tea invitation. The worse things get, the drier your tone becomes. You once wrote, "Evening was brisk," after a blizzard blew out half the tent and scattered your socks across a glacier. You were proud of that understatement. Still are. Sometimes the codes grow more elaborate. You start giving nicknames to situations. Tea time alpha refers to any moment when someone accidentally knocks over the pot before it boils. Operation Biscuit Recovery means the cook burned the bottom of the rations again. Condition sardine is what you call it when the tent is so packed no one can shift without dislocating a hip. And wool protocol delta simply means someone farted and denied it. Historians still debate how reliable these journals are. They're primary sources, yes, but they're filtered through sarcasm, ego, and sometimes outright deception. Some scholars believe the dry tone was a way to keep up appearances. Others suggest it was survival instinct, the emotional equivalent of putting on a tie during an avalanche. But you know the truth. The code isn't there to hide from the outside world. It's there to protect your inner one, to give shape to chaos, to file suffering neatly between clever turns of phrase so it doesn't overwhelm you. Tonight, you write, breeze lively, stew experimental. Socks ambitious, spirits cautiously theoretical. You nod once, satisfied, and close the book. No one will ever decode it the way you mean it. But they won't have to. The truth's still there between the lines. Frozen, but intact. You crouch near the center of the tent, striking flint against steel, with a rhythm you've nearly perfected. Click, click, flicker, sputter. Nothing. Again. Click, click, spark. Tiny flame. Yes. You lean in, shielding it with your gloved hands like it's a baby bird, and carefully lower it toward the oil-soaked wick. The flame touches. It quivers. It thinks about going out. And then, miraculously, it holds. The seal oil catches and begins to burn with a sluggish orange glow. A faint hiss escapes the wick, as if the flame itself is uncertain whether it wants to live in this temperature. But there it is, a wobbling, flickering beacon of hope and soot. You adjust the wick, as always, a delicate operation made clumsy by your gloves. Removing them would give you better precision, but also invite frostbite to join the party. The flame grows taller, bolder. It stretches upward, casting distorted shadows along the sagging canvas of the tent roof. That's when the fear kicks in, because the canvas is not what you'd call non-flammable. It's oiled cloth, well used, slightly torn, and already carrying a dozen soot marks from previous near misses. The ceiling hangs lower in the center, weighed down by collected frost. The last thing you want is for this gentle light to become an accidental bonfire. So you hunch. You lean. You position the lamp precisely in the shallow basin dug out for it, surrounded by stones or, on bad days, biscuit tins. Everyone does the same, placing their lamps in a ring of trust, their own makeshift hearths carved out of snow, ice, and good intentions. There's no actual warmth from the lamp. It gives the impression of warmth, the kind that makes you feel like you could almost remember being warm once. That's the best you can hope for. But the light, the light. It fills the space with flickering color, tinting everything in bronze and shadow. It softens faces, hides the worst of the exhaustion under gentle pools of orange. You glance up, checking again that the flame isn't licking too close to the canvas. One time, early on, someone placed their lamp too high on a wooden crate. The flame kissed the ceiling, and the result was spectacular. If you like spectacular things that smell like melting fabric and panic. Since then, everyone's more cautious. You all know that the light you love could also cook you alive. Historians often note the importance of seal oil lamps on polar expeditions. They mention the utility, melting snow for water, cooking rudimentary meals. But they rarely capture the tension, the way each flicker could either brighten the tent or end it, the way you watch the ceiling as much as the flame. Tonight the lamp behaves, the tent glows, the ceiling sweats just a little from the heat, and you exhale for the first time in hours, knowing you'll get through another night without burning the roof off your frozen sanctuary. You touch your face, and your fingers come away gray. Again. You sigh, then try wiping your cheek with the back of your sleeve, only to remember your sleeve is also gray, just with more texture. You're not sure when your skin stopped being skin and started being soot collector, but it's been days, maybe weeks. You no longer keep count. The lamps glow beautifully, yes, but they also belch out tiny black ghosts that cling to every surface, especially you. Seal oil burns dirty. That's just how it is. The wick hisses, the flame dances, and somewhere in the shadows, a faint thread of black smoke curls upward. Silent, stealthy, and destined for your pores. It floats, it swirls, and then it lands on your nose. On your lips, inside your ears. You once found soot on your teeth. You still don't know how it got there. There was a time when soot annoyed you. You'd clean yourself with snow, scrub your face with a wool rag, polish your nails with a pocket knife if you had time. That time has passed. Now you accept it like you accept the wind or the cold as part of the daily ambience. You're not so much a person anymore as a human lantern chimney. It's fine. It's functional. Of course, there's still a line. Everyone has their limit. For one man, it was when he sneezed into his hand and realized he'd left behind a black smear like a coal miner. For another, it was when his mustache turned charcoal and began to flake into his tea. That was the day he shaved it off with a piece of sharpened tin and a mirror made of hope. He still regrets it. The tent fabric tells the full story. Wherever the lamps sit, there's a halo of grime, a reverse sunburst of soot stains. The walls are streaked with handprints, nose prints, elbow smudges. You once leaned against a support pole in the dark and walked around for an hour with a black bar down your cheek. No one told you. Not because they were cruel, but because they all had one too. You try to wash sometimes. Snow helps. You scoop up a handful, rub it into your cheeks like a maniacal spa guest, and wipe it off with a towel that already gave up years ago. For 10 seconds, your skin feels alive, raw, pink, slightly less sooty. And then you light the lamp again. The cycle resumes. Historians mention lamp soot in passing as a nuisance, an inconvenience. What they don't mention is how personal it becomes. You don't just fight soot. You learn to carry it. It's a layer of identity now, like your smell or your voice or your ever-stiffening blanket. Tonight, as you lie back in the flickering orange glow, your face speckled with another day's worth of fine Arctic grime, you touch your chin and shrug. Tomorrow, you might be a little darker. A little more soot than skin, but at least you're still here to smudge the walls. You notice it one night when the lamp flickers just right and casts your hand against the tent wall. A long shadow, stretched and distorted, like a creature from some half-remembered dream. Without thinking, you wiggle your fingers. The shadow dances. You wiggle them again. Suddenly you're a rabbit, a deformed one maybe, but undeniably a rabbit. You chuckle. It's the first sound of amusement you've made in days. Soon it becomes a ritual. A gentle evening absurdity, tucked between the miseries of cold stew and stiff boots. The lamps cast the only warmth and light you get, and that light becomes your canvas. You begin practicing. Your fox is terrible. Your goose looks like a hand with indigestion, but your moose isn't half bad. 2 fingers arched into horns, a shadow that makes someone laugh softly in the dark. That's worth something. You keep at it. You refine. Some nights your tent mates notice and join in. First reluctantly, then with surprising creativity. One of them manages a crude seal that bobs across the canvas. Another makes a dog. Someone else invents a creature with 12 legs and no face, which becomes an inside joke. The thing that ate the biscuits. In a world where the only things that change are the wind direction and your body temperature, shadow puppets offer movement, silliness, escape. You use them to tell stories, exaggerated versions of the day's events. One night, you reenact the tragic tale of Evans tripping over the stew pot. Everyone howls with laughter, even Evans. There's a fine line between madness and creativity, and you're all dancing on it like tightrope walkers in wool socks. The puppets don't make the cold go away. They don't dry your socks. But they do something almost as important. They remind you that your mind hasn't frozen yet. Historians rarely mention these moments. The journals are full of suffering, logistics, distances covered. But between the lines, Between supplies down 20% and morale low, there are gaps. Little white spaces where a man might have drawn a crude fox in the corner or written, "Smythe made a shadow walrus today." Surprisingly accurate. You wish more of that had been preserved. The light on the tent wall dances with your movements. You animate a sled dog chase, a ship at sea, a captain shouting orders. There's no dialogue, just gestures and laughter and the warmth of shared imagination. For a few minutes, the wind outside becomes background noise. Your children again, or actors or storytellers in a cave. Then the lamp sputters, flares, and returns to steady. Your shadow moose collapses into a fist. You wiggle your fingers one last time before settling into your bedroll. The others murmur their appreciation. You've won the unofficial prize for least depressing tent moment. And tonight, when the cold creeps in as it always does, you hold on to the memory of that moose. That silly, flickering moose with wobbly antlers and a warmth no fire could produce. It starts, as many things do in the Arctic, with good intentions and poor lighting. Someone gets up in the middle of the night, perhaps to adjust their boots, fetch more snow for melting, or find a misplaced sock. The lamp had been burning low, guttering just enough to make the shadows nervous. The man fumbles, trips, or maybe just breathes a little too hard in the wrong direction, and then, whoosh, a sudden flare. A tiny inferno where there definitely should not be one. Panic moves slower than fire in the cold. At first, no one reacts. Everyone thinks it's just the lamp flickering. But then someone smells burning wool. Someone else shouts, "Oi, lamp!" And suddenly the tent is alive. Men scramble from bedrolls. Blankets are flung. Boots crash into elbows. Someone tries to smother the flame with a canvas flap and only succeeds in feeding it. Another throws a handful of snow that melts before it lands. The blaze doesn't last long. It never does. There's too much dampness in the fabric, too little air inside the crowded tent. But it's enough to singe one man's scarf, blacken the tent wall, and create the lasting memory of what happens when seal oil, poor judgment, and confined quarters meet under pressure. Afterward, everyone is quiet. The adrenaline fades, replaced by the chill of soaking blankets and the creeping knowledge that things could have been much worse. The man who knocked the lamp over offers a sheepish apology. It's accepted with a nod, though not quite forgiven. He'll be reminded for days in the subtle way Arctic men deliver judgment. A raised eyebrow when he touches a lamp, a muttered, "Careful now," when he shifts too close to the fire pit. The smell lingers. Burnt wool and scorched oil leave behind a scent that defies forgetting. It joins the nightly perfume of feet, sweat, and stew gone sideways, a new addition to the tent's ever-growing olfactory resume. Someone, later that evening, tries to joke about it. "At least we were warm for 30 seconds. A laugh follows, a real one. Maybe the first of the day. Then someone else adds, "Should have roasted a biscuit while we had the chance." More laughter. The tension begins to melt. Slowly. Like lamp soot under steam. Historians often gloss over these small fires in expedition logs, noting them only as minor accidents or unfortunate singeing events. But among the crew, they're unforgettable. They become bedtime stories, passed around like shared scars. Not because of the danger, but because of the absurdity. The way something could go so wrong, so fast, and yet leave everyone mostly intact, except for one melted boot sole and a very embarrassed cook. You lie back down eventually, your blanket slightly damper than you'd like, your nerves still buzzing. The tent is darker now, No one wants to risk relighting the lamp yet. But there's a kind of peace in the quiet aftermath. You survived the blaze. You'll joke about it tomorrow, maybe even write it down in your journal as an overzealous illumination. And maybe, just maybe, you'll sleep a little lighter from now on. Out here, time doesn't pass. It loops. The sun vanished weeks ago, slipping below the horizon with the kind of dramatic flare that only matters in retrospect. Since then, you've lived in twilight and pitch black, a slow-turning reel of grey dimness and inky gloom. Days and nights mean nothing now. The concept of morning is a polite fiction. Evening is just a guess. And lunchtime depends entirely on when the cook starts boiling stew. You used to mark time precisely. Your expedition issued you a pocket watch, shiny and reassuring. It ticked with the pomp of civilization, a small, controlled machine in a world that defied control. You checked it often. You wound it every night like it was a prayer. Now it feels absurd. The hands tick steadily on, but the context has dissolved. 10 in the morning looks exactly like 2 in the morning. The same shadows, the same wind, the same frost whispering at the seams of your socks. So instead you measure time by oddities. When the oil in the lamp runs low, it must be late. When your socks feel damp again, it must be time to rotate them. When you realize you haven't spoken aloud for hours, and someone starts humming the same line of the same sea shanty for the 6th time, well, that's probably the end of the day. Or the middle. It really doesn't matter anymore. Some of your crewmates try to maintain structure. The captain still calls out arbitrary hours like a priest invoking long-dead saints. "Lights out at 2100, he shouts, as if anyone in the tent can tell what hour it is, or what lights out even means when the lights never came on. One man clings to his wristwatch, squinting at it as if the numbers will validate his internal clock. It tells him when to sleep, when to eat, when to sigh. It lies. He knows it lies. But it's a structured lie, and that's worth something. You, on the other hand, have begun trusting your body. You sleep when your eyelids twitch. You eat when your stomach growls. You write in your journal when your hands stop shaking. It's not perfect. Sometimes you nap for 15 minutes and wake up thinking it's Tuesday. Sometimes you stare at the same patch of tent wall for hours, certain that if you squint just right, the frost patterns will form a calendar. Historians still argue how polar explorers managed to keep track of time during endless night. Some say they use strict shifts, rotating by hourglasses and oil measurements. Others believe they gave up entirely, surrendering to the rhythm of cold and necessity. A few journals mention dream clocks, inner instincts trained to guess the hour from muscle aches and stomach churns. That, you think, sounds about right. Tonight, you glance at your pocket watch. The hands show 3:17 a.m. You have no idea what that means anymore, but the lamp's still burning, your feet are still attached, and the stew hasn't boiled over. That's close enough to evening for you. At home, 4 p.m. meant tea, a fire, the clatter of porcelain, maybe a nap if you were lucky. Out here, it's bedtime. Not because you're tired, though you always are, but because pretending 4 p.m. is bedtime gives the day structure. And structure, in this endless freeze, is the only thing keeping your mind from dissolving like sugar in cold tea. It started innocently. The sun disappeared, and the clock became a suggestion. No one wanted to admit how hard it was getting. Then one night, after a particularly long and soul-grinding afternoon of frostbite inspections and soggy pemmican, someone rolled into his bedroll at 4 o'clock p.m. sharp and declared, "I'm done." No further explanation. He just muttered something about resetting the internal sundial and disappeared under his blanket. No one questioned him. We all looked at our watches, or those of us who still bothered, and slowly followed. Within a few days, it became the norm. 4 o'clock became bedtime. 7:30 was the new midnight. Morning. Around what used to be 1 o'clock a.m., you adjusted not because it made sense, but because it gave you a rhythm. It worked. Sort of. You could count on 4 p.m. Now, even the tent smells different around that hour, a mixture of wool, oil, and resignation. You begin to associate that time with tucking in, with silence, with someone grumbling softly about whose turn it is to snuff the lamp. Some men resisted. One insisted on staying up until actual midnight, lighting his lamp and journaling for hours. He looked increasingly wild-eyed and unsure. Eventually, he gave in. Another tried waking everyone at true dawn, only to be pelted with socks and one particularly hard biscuit. After that, the group settled into its new order. Bedtime by dusk, even when dusk is eternal. You start performing rituals at 3:30. Fluff the sleeping roll, though it can't be fluffed. Change your socks, though they're still damp. Brush your teeth with snow and resolve. Maybe say a few words into the void, not quite a prayer, not quite a complaint. Then, by 4 o'clock p.m., you're horizontal, eyes open, staring at canvas. Thinking about how strange it is that this all now feels normal. Historians still debate how polar expeditions adjusted to constant darkness. Some claim they used artificial clocks and scheduled bells to simulate time. Others argue that, unofficially, each crew created its own local truth, a constructed day built on collective agreement. Whichever it was, it saved sanity. You've never appreciated fake routines more. 4 o'clock doesn't feel like bedtime, but it is bedtime. And by sticking to it, you give the mind something to cling to, an edge on which to hang the idea of tomorrow. Tonight, as 3:59 passes silently, you lie down, exhale into your scarf and mutter, "Good night," even though someone's still stirring tea. It's not about logic, it's about pretending. And pretending tonight is the only way to stay sane. There's no actual switch. No click, no dimmer, no drawn curtain. And yet, every evening, at whatever hour you've collectively agreed is night, someone murmurs, "Lights out," and the tent obeys. Lamps are turned down. Shadows reclaim the walls. Voices fade. It's a bedtime ritual born not from electricity, but from exhaustion and an unspoken pact to pretend things still have structure. You've come to appreciate the phrase. Lights out doesn't mean darkness. It means surrender. Surrender to the fact that there's nothing left to do, nothing left to prepare, nothing more that can be fixed today. The stew was eaten. The boots were mended badly. The journal was updated, probably with another entry about how cold your toes still are. Lights out means you're done trying. Now you just lie still and try not to think about how weird it is to have a bedtime in a place where the sun forgot you existed. The lamps go out one by one, each with a small hiss and flicker, like tiny dragons giving up. The last lamp always takes a moment longer. There's hesitation. No one wants to be the one to officially usher in the void. But eventually, someone reaches for the wick with gloved fingers and shh. The tent goes full black. And then it begins, the whispered negotiations. Someone coughs, someone shifts, someone mutters, "Move your elbow, mate." In the darkness, everything becomes exaggerated. Sounds expand. The crunch of someone rolling over sounds like a landslide. A sneeze is practically artillery fire. The man nearest the flap always snores first and loudest, but no one raises their voice. Not after lights out. That's the contract. Complaints are whispered, requests come in grumbles. Even arguments, real ones, about things like who's stealing whose blanket, are conducted in the tones of disgruntled monks. You find yourself whispering things you wouldn't say aloud. You don't know why. Maybe the darkness loosens something in the brain. One night, you told the tent you missed your cat. No one laughed. Someone responded, "I miss my stairs." That made sense too. There's a strange power in this shared silence, a unity forged not in words, but in breath and proximity, and mutual consent to pretend that sleep will come soon, that the tent won't leak, that tomorrow might be less gray than today. These thoughts drift gently across your mind as the cold creeps into your sleeping roll, slow and deliberate. Historians still debate how much structure crews managed during endless nights. Logs refer to bunks, sleep shifts, lamps extinguished at 2,000 hours. But those were formality. The real rules were the quiet ones, enforced by custom and fatigue. Lights out wasn't a command. It was a peace treaty. Tonight, as the last rustling dies down, and the quiet settles heavy over the tent like a second blanket, you lie still, listening to the subtle symphony of breath and creaking fabric. No light. No talking. Just the hush of survival and the comfort of people pretending together. You pull your pocket watch from its little canvas pouch and hold it near your chest like a relic. It's wrapped in layers of flannel and good intentions, tucked close to your body throughout the day so it won't freeze solid. Even then, it occasionally stops. You wind it gently now, the crown creaking ever so slightly, and listen for the soft, stubborn tick of something still working, something still pretending time matters. The watch ticks, steady, precise, entirely detached from the nonsense surrounding it. It doesn't care that the sun hasn't shown its face in weeks, that every hour looks like the one before it, that you're not even sure what day it is anymore. It just ticks onward, faithful and indifferent, a metronome for a song you can't hear anymore. Some of the others have watches too, wrist watches mostly, or ship clocks tucked in crates back on the main sled, but fewer and fewer bother winding them. There's a man in your tent who let his run down a week ago. When you asked why, he just shrugged and said, "Didn't want to listen to it anymore. Felt like it was mocking me." You can see what he meant. Because there's something eerie about a device that continues its rhythm when yours has stalled. When your day is just a blur of wet socks, canned meat, and speculative stew, a ticking watch feels almost smug. Like a friend who keeps making to-do lists after your house burned down. And yet, you still wind it. Every night, you cradle it between your palms, breathe on it slightly to keep the gears warm, and turn the key like it matters. Maybe it does. Not for navigation anymore. The stars have long since vanished under gray clouds. But as a reminder, a ritual. A sound you can depend on. In a world of shifting snow and unreliable boots, that tick is an anchor. Historians often note that explorers were obsessed with timekeeping. That watches were among the most well-maintained tools on an expedition. But they don't always explain why. Some say it was for astronomical readings. Others point to schedule management. But you suspect it's simpler. In a place where everything feels lost, a working watch says, "Not everything is. You've given it a name. You don't tell anyone." That would feel strange, but in your head it's Ethel. Why? You don't know. Just a name. Something solid. Ethel ticks when the lamp flickers. Ethel ticks when your hands shake. Ethel ticks when you stare at the tent wall trying to remember what your sister's voice sounds like. Tonight, as your eyes grow heavy and your sleeping bag huddles around you like a reluctant hug, you press the watch to your ear and count the seconds. They tick slowly, but they tick. A quiet heartbeat for a frozen world. And even if your thoughts spiral and your hope dims and you forget what tomorrow is supposed to mean, Ethel won't. The blanket is a traitor, or at least that's how it feels at 2 a.m. when it refuses to lie evenly between you and the man to your left. You pull an inch your way and he pulls back 2. You adjust again, subtly, pretending to roll over. He counters with a full body turn that yanks the blanket nearly off your shoulder. The air hits your neck like an insult. You sigh dramatically and accept defeat, for now. Shared blankets sound cozy on paper. They're efficient, space-saving, and theoretically promote warmth and unity. In practice, they're daily battlegrounds, where diplomacy is tested more severely than in any map room. 1 shared wool rectangle, 6 men, and 20 below zero. What could go wrong? You all started off polite. The first night was full of generous offers. You take more, I'll be fine. No, really, I insist. Here, tuck this corner under your arm. That lasted about a week. Then the weather dipped another 10 degrees, and generosity froze right alongside your toes. Now, blanket strategy has evolved into a science. Everyone knows their section, a loose imaginary grid of shared fabric that must not, under any circumstance, be violated. Encroachment is a serious offense. Passive aggression is expressed through exaggerated shifting and the occasional, totally accidental elbow jab. The edges of the blanket are premium territory. If you get an edge, you can wrap it, cocoon-like, around yourself. If you're in the middle, you're at the mercy of every other man's fidgeting. Middle sleep requires Zen-level detachment. Or earplugs. There's an unspoken pecking order that determines blanket rights. Older men, men with injuries, or those who managed to not fart during dinner, often earn sympathy coverage. Others fend for themselves. You once saw 2 men play rock, paper, scissors for an extra corner. The loser sulked under a flap of blanket so thin it might as well have been a napkin. Historians often romanticize the spirit of camaraderie among Arctic explorers. They describe shared blankets as symbols of mutual trust, and maybe they were, during daylight hours. But at night, those symbols became sources of quiet rebellion and grudging adaptation. The real triumph wasn't surviving frostbite. It was surviving each other under shared wool. Tonight, you managed to slide an extra bit of blanket under your chin without retaliation. Victory. You nestle into it, willing the fabric to stay put. Around you, the shifting begins again. The great midnight ballet of wool redistribution. You close your eyes and brace for the next skirmish. Because in this tent, under this blanket, peace is temporary. Warmth is a zero-sum game, and the line between cooperation and chaos is exactly 2 threads thick. You didn't mean to start doing it. But once the nights got colder and the space tighter, it became inevitable. Everyone does it now. Silently, instinctively. The mental ranking. You lie there under the blanket, surrounded by your crewmates, and begin calculating the equation that determines your nightly comfort. Warmth, X silence, odor. At the top of your list is Mathers. Warm, quiet, neutral scent. He doesn't toss, doesn't hog, doesn't breathe like a walrus with a deviated septum. He's a textbook perfect blanket mate. You position yourself next to him when you can, subtly inching closer during the pre-bed shuffle without making it obvious. Everyone wants to sleep near Mathers. He knows this. He pretends he doesn't. Next comes Collins. Also warm, but a snorer. A creative snorer. Sometimes it's a rumble, sometimes a wheeze. Occasionally something that sounds like a distant goat being stepped on. Not ideal, but manageable with a scarf pulled over your ears. He smells faintly of fish oil and tobacco, which is oddly tolerable compared to the others. Then there's Jenkins, the wild card. Some nights he's totally still, like a log, radiating reliable heat. Other nights, he thrashes like he's being chased through dreamland by an angry seal. You've taken an elbow to the ribs from Jenkins, twice. His rank fluctuates depending on his level of nighttime drama. Smells vaguely like lamp wick and wet mittens. Lower on the list is Rawlins. Cool-bodied, always needs more blanket than he claims. One of those guys who accidentally pulls a full third of the wool to himself and then plays dumb about it in the morning. Also, he talks in his sleep. Long conversations with people who aren't there. Once he whispered, "You'll never find the onions." You didn't sleep the rest of the night. At the bottom of the list, sorry but it's true, is Ferguson. Smells like old stew, always damp. Not sure why. Claims he's not sweating, but the blanket tells a different story. Also, his feet are like two frozen bricks. He always wants to warm them just a bit, and inevitably presses them against someone's spine. You've developed a sixth sense for when Ferguson is angling your way, and adjust accordingly. The rankings shift, of course. Someone who snored last week might be angelic tonight. Someone who used to radiate heat now shivers constantly. Illness changes things. Mood does too, but the general list stays intact in your mind, an unspoken social survival chart for shared sleeping. Historians write about polar hardship, but rarely about these nightly politics. There's nothing in the logs about strategic blanket positioning or body heat hierarchy, but they mattered just as much as rations and maps, perhaps more. Because while a good meal could keep you alive for a day, a good blanket mate could help you sleep through the night without wanting to weep. Tonight, you're next to Mathers. He's already asleep, exhaling softly. You smile, grateful, and pull the blanket snug. And try not to think about the fact that Rawlins is directly behind you, murmuring something about onions again. You've heard of economies based on gold, salt, even tulip bulbs. But here, in the frozen belly of nowhere, the dominant currency is square footage of shared wool. Welcome to the Great Blanket Barter, a nightly market of muffled negotiations, subtle trades, and quiet ambition. The stakes? Warmth. The cost? Pride. It begins subtly. A look across the tent, a nod, a shift closer. Blanket real estate changes hands in half-inch increments. You can gain territory with charm, with sympathy, or occasionally with food. You once secured an extra 6 inches of blanket from Collins in exchange for a spoonful of honey. That was a good deal. You would have given him the whole jar if it meant not waking up with your shoulders cold. But there are rules. Unspoken, yes, but rules nonetheless. You don't ask outright. That's gauche. No one says, "Can I have more blanket?" Instead, you sigh dramatically, shiver conspicuously, or whisper a line like, "Think the wind's shifting again," as if that explains your sudden repositioning closer to the heat. Then there's the matter of edge control. If you're sleeping on the edge, you have leverage. You can choose to pull a bit tighter, force a rebalance of the blanket map, but you risk being labeled a hoarder. People remember. A man who takes more than his fair share of wool is a marked man. The tent has long memory. Warmth-rich individuals, those blessed with higher body heat or simply better insulation, become high-value partners. If you can't get near them, you trade with someone who is. One night you swapped tent spot rotation with Ferguson just to be second in line next to Mathers. Ferguson grinned. Mathers never knew. Or maybe he did and chose not to comment. The worst position is the bridge. That's the person who ends up between two territorial sleepers, neither of whom wants to share. You become the neutral zone, the human demilitarized area. Your job is to not breathe too hard or tug too boldly, lest one side retaliate and throw the entire wool balance into disarray. Historians rarely record the internal politics of Arctic sleeping arrangements. Diaries mention temperatures, distances, rations. But they don't say, "I gave up an extra biscuit to avoid sleeping next to the man who breathes too loud," or "shared wool edge tonight in exchange for firewood duty tomorrow." But these trades happened. Every night, they were as integral to survival as boots or beef. You become skilled at negotiation without words. A glance can mean everything. A raised brow, a cleared throat. These are blanket diplomacy signals. And when the blanket shifts slightly in your favor, when the edge creeps across your thigh and no one protests, you know, the deal was accepted. Tonight, you've struck a delicate balance. One leg covered, one shoulder exposed, but it's worth it. You've made peace with both sides. No one's grumbling. The blanket lies still, and for a few blessed hours, you'll sleep like a king in a lopsided cocoon of political compromise. At first, it's just a tug. A small, almost innocent adjustment of the blanket. Maybe your toes got cold. Maybe your shoulder peeked out. Maybe Ferguson shifted in his sleep again and took more than his share, so you tug it back. Gently, respectfully, but firmly. Then it happens again. A counter-tug, not aggressive yet, but clearly intentional. A warning shot. You freeze. The tent is quiet except for breathing, snoring, and the occasional wind groaning against the canvas. But you can feel it now, the tension under the wool. The air has changed. The blanket is no longer neutral ground. You try diplomacy, rolling slightly, easing the fabric back toward your side with a subtle thigh lift. For a moment it seems to work. Then the blanket yanks. Full force. There's no ambiguity now. You've entered the realm of midnight warfare. You lurch upright, half wrapped in tangled wool, glaring into the dim. "Really?" you whisper, not naming names. No one answers. Someone coughs. Someone else mumbles, "Go back to sleep." But you know who did it. And they know you know. Now it's a matter of principle. You grab your half and pull it firmly, your motion tugging across the bodies of at least two innocent bystanders. One of them mutters a profanity. Another rolls over, knocking a tin mug to the floor. The lamp flickers. The dogs stir outside. And just like that, a cold war turns hot. In the darkness, the wrestling begins. Not punches. Not shouting. Just an awkward, shivering scuffle between grown men in long johns, fighting over an object that smells like damp wool and failure. Elbows jab. Hips bump. Blankets twist. Someone's nose gets bonked. No one is quite sure where the edges are anymore. One man yelps as the corner snaps free and exposes his backside to the elements. Someone else snickers. The tent groans with motion. Sleeping bags shuffle. Muffled curses fly. At some point, the captain barks from his bedroll. "If I lose one more degree of heat to this nonsense, you're all taking watch tonight." That quiets things for a minute. Eventually, fatigue wins. The wrestling fades. The blanket is redistributed by consensus or resignation. Everyone flops back down in silence, breathing hard through their noses, pretending nothing happened. Historians never mention these squabbles. You won't find dispute over shared blanket escalated to physical comedy at 02:17 hours in any official log, but they happened. Frequently. In every tent, on every expedition, anywhere a threadbare quilt met too many tired, half-frozen men with a surplus of pride. Tonight's match ends in a draw. You've got most of your side covered. Your elbow aches. You can hear someone muttering to themselves, nursing a bruised ego or shin. The tent grows still again. You lie back down, pull your reclaimed portion tight, and mutter, "Worth it." It wasn't. But out here, even petty victories feel like survival. It begins with a clink, the soft, dull ring of tin against tin, the signal that the nightly rum ration is about to begin. No fanfare. No speeches. Just that sound, sharp in the muffled silence of the tent, and a collective shift in attention. Heads turn. Bodies sit up. Cold limbs rearrange themselves into respectful readiness. Even the snorers pause as if on instinct. The cup is nothing special. Bent in one place, rim slightly warped from an old drop, but it's sacred now. Not for what it is, but for what it holds. Exactly one measure per man, no more, no less. A precious ounce of warmth that has nothing to do with wool or fire. The cook, or whoever is assigned the task that night, uncorks the rum bottle with a soft pop. Pours slowly, carefully, watching the line as it rises in the cup with reverence. Then, the handoff. The first man cradles the tin like it's made of glass, lifting it in two hands. He doesn't gulp. That would be barbaric. He sips, slowly. Eyes closed. His breath fogs the rim before he drinks. There's a moment of silence while the heat travels down his throat and into his chest. You can almost see it happen. The shoulders relax, the spine loosens, the lips twitch into a half-smile that wasn't there 10 seconds ago. Then, a low sigh. "Still tastes like varnish," someone mutters. He passes the cup to the next man. You watch it make its way around the tent, each man holding it like it might disappear if handled too fast. Some toast the lamp. One salutes the corner of the tent, for reasons no one questions. A few murmur old toasts from home, half-remembered lines about kings, country, or beloved pubs with sticky floors. No one minds. It's not about the words, it's about the moment. Then the cup reaches you. Your fingers, stiff in their gloves, take it with care. The tin is slightly warm. Your breath forms a halo around the rim as you raise it. The smell is sharp, molasses, alcohol, and the faintest hint of wood. You take your sip, not a gulp, not a swish. Just enough. It burns the inside of your mouth, coats your tongue, and slides down like a shot of memory. It tastes like defiance. Historians always mention the rum ration. They treat it as a bullet point, 1 ounce daily to maintain morale. But they don't describe this. The quiet awe, the ritual. The way the cup connects the crew more than any rope or oath. It's not about intoxication. It's about recognition. You're still human, still deserving of a shared moment of warmth, however small. You hand it off to the next man, who nods as if you've passed him something divine. And for a few seconds, as the tin glimmers in the lamplight and laughter rumbles low through the tent, you feel something rare and fleeting in the Arctic: content. 1 sip becomes 2. 2 sips become words. That's how it always starts. The tin cup makes its rounds. warming bodies and loosening tongues, and before long, the tent hums with low stories, half whispered, half sighed, about people and places no longer reachable, except through the haze of alcohol and memory. It begins with Stevens. It usually does. He holds the cup a little longer than he should, stares into it like it's a portal, then mutters, "She wore a green shawl." Every Sunday, even in summer. No one interrupts. No one asks who she is. We've learned it's best to let the sentence hang. Eventually, he adds, "Her name was Mabel, or maybe Margaret." It doesn't matter. Then he passes the cup on. Someone chuckles. Someone else sighs. That's how the floodgates open. Next, it's Carter, who launches into an elaborate tale about a bakery in Bristol that made honey cakes so good you'd forget your name. He talks for 8 full minutes about texture, crumb structure, whether the walnuts were roasted. You don't care. You listen, rapt. The way he speaks, it feels like you can almost taste the warmth. Then there's Farrell. Normally silent. Tonight, after his sip, he starts talking about a girl named Elise, or Elysia. The name changes as he goes. He doesn't mention how they parted, just that she danced barefoot in the rain and always smelled like oranges. It's entirely unclear whether she ever existed. That's not the point. You all take turns, not formally, not by order, just as the mood strikes. Some offer full recollections. Others just whisper a name and smile sadly. It's understood. The rum isn't there to make you drunk. It's there to open a door back to before the frost, the oil, the unending grayness of this place. You don't usually speak. But tonight, after your sip, you hear yourself say, "I once fell asleep in a library, woke up warm, sunlight on the carpet. The dust looked like gold." You hadn't planned to say it. It just slipped out and then you're quiet again. No one mocks you. Someone says, "That's a good one." Historians rarely dwell on these moments. The logs record rum issued, morale fair, as if that captures what it means to feel your throat burn and your chest swell with homesick joy. They don't note the way men lean toward each other in the firelight, seeking warmth that has nothing to do with flame. Eventually, the cup is empty, but the talking continues, not loudly, not competitively, just softly, like wind whispering through old pages. You lie back and listen, hearing fragments of lives that stretch far beyond this tent. Warm rivers, roaring fires, a cat named Harold who used to sleep on someone's neck. Tonight, the Arctic fades for a while. Not completely, but enough. Enough to remember who you were before this. Enough to carry on. You don't always drink your rum. Some nights it just doesn't sit right. Maybe you're already warm enough, though that's rare. Maybe the burn of it feels like more weight on your stomach. Or maybe you just can't take another sip that tastes like molasses-infused firewood. Either way, you've discovered a secret. The quiet trade. You first offered it to Jenkins on a whim. He looked particularly miserable, cheeks hollow, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor like he was reading secrets in the frost. You passed the tin and said, "Want mine?" He looked at you like you'd handed him a crown. Then he ladled you a scoop of extra stew without a word. And so a transaction was born. Now it's unofficial currency. You can barter your rum for a lot. Stew, a fresh biscuit, if such a thing exists anymore, an extra ladle of beans, even someone's turn tending the dogs. The cook won't openly condone it, but he turns a blind eye. He understands. Everyone has a preference. Some want warmth in the chest. You want something to chew. The stew isn't great. It never is. But it's thick, it's warm, and it doesn't burn going down. You've grown fond of its predictably mysterious contents. Tonight's offering contains something vaguely orange. Not carrot. Not anymore. But you accept your trade with a grateful nod and cradle the bowl like it's a treasure. Of course, not everyone approves. Stevens gives you that look again, the one that says, "You're squandering tradition." To him, the rum ration is more than a drink. It's heritage, ritual, duty. But he doesn't speak against it. Not out loud, not anymore. You suspect he's traded his rum, too, when no one's looking. Others are more brazen. Collins once bartered his for someone's dry socks. A bold move. Jenkins tried trading 3 future rations for a fresh can of tobacco. The barter failed when the tobacco turned out to be just biscuit crumbs and pipe soot. Historians almost never mention this kind of rebellion. The small, personal ways men bent the rules of survival to suit their needs. Diaries say things like ration received or supplies adequate. But between the lines, you can almost see it. Someone scratching out a note about swapping spirits for soup, not because they didn't need the buzz, but because they needed one full belly before bed. It's not mutiny. It's not disrespect. It's adaptation. Tonight, you eat your stew in silence while the others sip. No one questions you. Someone chuckles about the mystery meat. You nod, grateful. Not just for the warmth, but for the choice. Because in a place where so little is yours, where the cold dictates what you wear, when you sleep, how long you can feel your feet, the power to say, "I'll have stew instead," feels like a quiet revolution. And that's more satisfying than any drink. You always know when it's going to happen. It starts with the captain checking his pocket watch a few too many times. He adjusts his scarf, tightens his gloves, and frowns just slightly. What you've all come to recognize as the prelude to an administrative oversight. Then, when the stew's been swallowed and the bread scraped clean, he stands, clears his throat, and says something like, "No rum tonight, lads." Bit behind on inventory. There's always a pause. The kind of pause that holds the collective weight of disbelief, restraint, and slow-burning rage. No one protests, at least not out loud. But you can feel it ripple across the tent. Spoons clink harder against tin. Someone exhales just a little too sharply. Another mutters into his collar. Inventory, you all know, is code. The truth is, the captain sometimes withholds the rum. Not because the stores are low, not because the bottle's missing, but because something happened that day. Something he thinks makes the crew unworthy of the ritual. A minor skirmish over blankets. An insult tossed too harshly. A failed task done sloppily. Or worse, a mood. He won't admit it, of course. He'll talk about discipline, about allocating resources responsibly. But the truth is, it's punishment. Mild, yes. Passive-aggressive, definitely. Effective. Sometimes, it's not just about the rum. It's about the moment. The warmth, the ritual. Taking it away sends a message. I'm still in charge. I still control something, even if it's just a few sips of diluted morale. Some men take it personally. Jenkins once threw a spoon against the tent wall. Farrell refused to speak for 2 days. Others shrug it off. "Better for my liver," Carter says whenever the rum is skipped, though his voice tightens at the edges. You try not to let it get to you, but it does, a little. You don't need the rum every night, but you expect it. The way you expect snow or wind or the shape of your own breath against the tent wall. Its absence feels like someone turned down the volume on humanity. Historians, when they mention withheld rations, Write it in passive language. Delayed, redistributed, reconsidered for morale purposes. But in truth, it was psychological warfare in miniature. A power flex disguised as pragmatism. A way for the captain to remind you that he still has levers to pull. One night, weeks ago, someone asked him outright, "Captain, is the rum really out, or are we being taught a lesson?" He looked up from his notes, smiled just faintly, and said, "If you can't taste absence, you'll never appreciate presence." No one spoke after that. Tonight, the bottle stays closed. The tin cup remains on its side. The stew was passable, the silence thick. You lie back and think about the taste of something you didn't get, not because it was gone, but because someone decided you hadn't earned it. And somehow, that tastes worse. You never intended to sleep in the coldest corner. It just happened. Maybe you were too slow laying out your bedroll. Maybe someone accidentally shifted your gear while rearranging crates. Or maybe, like so many other things in this expedition, it was fate's little joke. You wanted adventure? Here's your prize. The Arctic's personal icebox. This spot is a marvel of physics. No matter how thick your blanket, how many socks you double up, how tight you cinch your sleeping roll, cold finds you. It creeps in like a fog, slow and patient, curling around your neck, slipping beneath your knees, settling deep in your spine like an unwanted tenant. You try everything. You line the floor with spare canvas. You pile socks into your pillowcase. One night you even tried sleeping with the dog's hot water bottle, until it leaked and you woke up soggy and betrayed. Nothing helps for long. The cold always wins. The others say things like, "Switch spots with me tomorrow," but they don't mean it. They offer like it's a kindness, but everyone knows this corner is cursed. Once you've got it, it clings to you. You're the guy who sleeps where breath turns to ice on contact. You're the first one to shiver, the last one to thaw, but you adapt. You develop rituals. You sleep with your gloves still on, hands curled like claws under your chin. You tuck your hat so low it nearly chokes you. You learn not to exhale toward your chest, lest condensation form and freeze. You turn only when absolutely necessary, like you're rotating a roast. Precision movement, minimal energy loss. Historians often gloss over this part of Arctic life. They mention sleeping quarters as if the experience was equitable. But tents have corners, and corners have consequences. The closer to the edge, the closer to misery. Occasionally, a kind soul sneaks you an extra scrap of blanket or shifts closer to lend body heat. These small gestures feel like miracles. Not grand, not heroic, just humane. You remember each one. Tonight, the cold is especially cruel. The wind outside makes the canvas groan, like it's contemplating collapse. Your breath rises in little ghosts, but you're used to this. You know how to fold your arms tight, how to shrink yourself into a thermal comma. You lie there, eyes shut, humming a lullaby you don't remember learning. It's not comfortable, but it's survivable, because even in the coldest corner you've learned the rules. Don't move too fast, don't breathe too hard, don't waste warmth on resentment, and above all, don't wait for warmth. Make your own. It happens every night now, like clockwork but colder. You lie down, if that's the right word for curling into a bundle of half-numb limbs and hope, and wait. For sleep, yes, but also for the delicate, slightly humiliating sensation of your moustache stiffening into a miniature frost sculpture. You exhale slowly. The warmth of your breath rises, but only briefly. The second it hits the already bitter air near your face, It condenses and clings to your facial hair in tiny crystalline flakes. It's not immediate. You usually get a few breaths in, 5 if you're lucky, before the creeping chill begins to form its nightly masterpiece. By the time you drift off, you're wearing your own ice mask. At first, it startled you. The sensation of something stiff and foreign on your lip, a kind of frosty spiderweb tugging at each whisker. You thought you were bleeding once. Another time you woke up convinced a snowflake had nested in your nose, but no, just breath, betraying you again. Now it's routine. You even check in with yourself. Ah, yes, the mustache is freezing. Must be bedtime. Some of the others suffer the same fate. Collins has taken to rubbing a bit of whale oil on his upper lip before sleeping. He claims it works, though it also makes him smell like a lantern. Rawlins trimmed his mustache entirely out of protest. No one noticed until he angrily pointed it out during breakfast. Stevens tried sleeping with a scarf over his mouth, but woke up gagging in his own condensation. He hasn't attempted it since. There's no real fix. You can't not breathe. You can't exactly shave in these conditions, though someone once tried with a dull folding knife and bandaged lip. And so, like everything else, you simply accept it. The mustache freezes. You sleep. You wake up with frost on your face and wipe it away like yesterday's worries. Historians don't often document this particular indignity. Diaries might mention cold nights or facial discomfort, but they rarely dwell on the quiet, numbing annoyance of becoming your own snow globe. It's too mundane, too specific, too ridiculous. And yet, night after night, it's part of the Arctic ritual. Tonight, you feel it happen as you begin to drift. Your breath fogs and clings, solidifying on the little hairs under your nose. The icy threads pull ever so slightly as your face relaxes. It's not painful, just present. A reminder. The Arctic leaves its mark everywhere, even on your whiskers. You smile despite yourself, because if you can still feel your mustache freeze, it means you're still alive. Still breathing, still here. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to fall asleep by. It's a sound so quiet, you'd miss it if you didn't already know to listen for it. A whisper. A hush. A dry, papery THFF, barely audible above your own breath. But once you notice it, it becomes everything. The gentle, rhythmic patter of snow collecting on the canvas above you. It's not like rain, which drums and spatters and makes itself known. Snow is sneakier. It arrives like a secret. Each flake barely heavier than a sigh, layering one by one until the tent seems to shrink, wrapped tighter in the Arctic's white embrace. Tonight, you hear it clearly. A soft, persistent rhythm overhead, so faint it might just be your imagination. But you know it's real because the air feels denser now, thicker with cold, quieter in spirit. The kind of silence that isn't empty but full, cradling the tent in a muffled stillness that makes you hold your breath just to preserve it. The others have fallen into their usual sleep routines, snoring, muttering, some still curled around half-frozen bedrolls. But you lie awake, listening, not because you're uncomfortable, though you are, but because this particular kind of silence feels sacred. The snowflakes pile up slowly, pressing their weight against the fabric with the gentlest of insistence. You can almost imagine the canvas bowing, just slightly, a shallow dip forming as the weight accumulates. You hope someone brushes it off in the morning before it turns to ice. Or worse, collapses the whole roof on your face. But for now, you're oddly grateful for the sound. Historians tend to overlook the auditory landscape of Arctic nights. They describe the visuals, the endless white, the howling storms, but rarely the quiet. The deep, thick quiet that feels like being swallowed by winter itself. A silence so complete, so total, it becomes a sound of its own. Sometimes the snow is so light you imagine you can hear individual flakes making landfall, like tiny footsteps tiptoeing across canvas. Other times it comes in heavier bursts, soft but firm, like someone patting the roof to remind you how small you are. And every time, it slows your breathing, calms your heart, makes you feel, just for a moment, like you're not part of some massive, dangerous expedition, but a child again, hiding under blankets during a snowstorm, listening to the roof collect snow and the world disappear. You close your eyes. You let the sound carry you. Not to dreams yet, but to the edge of them. That soft place where sleep begins not with a drop into darkness, but with the feeling of weightless snow resting lightly above your head. You think, if the world ended right now, it would be quiet. And then you drift off. Sleep finally catches you, slow and sneaky like a blanket warming from the inside. At first, it's simple. You're back home. There's a fireplace. The orange glow flickers against the walls of a familiar room, casting long shadows on bookshelves and wooden beams. You can hear a kettle in the next room, whistling lazily. The chair you're curled up in has a groove that fits your body just right. You don't even question it. You don't need to question it. It just feels safe. But then, as always, things shift. The fire crackles once too loud. The glow dims and turns gray. You look again, and it's not a fireplace anymore. It's a mound of snow, flickering with frost instead of flame. You blink. A seabird lands on the windowsill, peering in with jet-black eyes. You recognize it. A guillemot, maybe, or a little auk, except it's not blinking. It's frozen solid. Its wings are stiff, beak frosted over, but it stares all the same. The chair beneath you groans, not with comfort, but with the sound of timber cracking in the cold. The books on the shelf curl at the edges, the pages icing over. You wrap your arms tighter around yourself, but even your coat has changed. The soft fabric of your dream has become stiff canvas, too familiar. The room darkens. Still the seabird stares. You know this dream. It's the one that always teeters on the edge of warmth and frost. One moment, your fingers are wrapped around a cup of tea. The next, you're gripping a block of ice. Sometimes the fireplace returns, if only for a few seconds. Sometimes the bird hops into the room, squawking in Morse code you can almost understand. Once, it turned into your old school teacher. You never figured that one out. Historians might chalk it up to stress dreams, dehydration, the mind reacting to the cold. Maybe they're right, but it doesn't explain the texture of it. How real the fire feels at first. How sharp the moment of loss is when it vanishes. How the seabird seems to know your name, though it never says it. You've talked to the others. They have their own recurring images. Collins dreams of a bakery where the bread screams. Jenkins once described a river that flowed uphill and turned to smoke. But none of them get the bird. That one's yours. Tonight, the fireplace flickers again. You sit in the chair and hold your hands out toward it. Just one more moment, you whisper in your mind. One more second of warmth. The seabird watches from the sill, silent and still, as the fire dies to a faint ember, and your dream shifts fully into ice. You wake up to your own breath, frosted against your scarf. The dream lingers, so does the cold. But for a few precious minutes, the warmth had felt real. And in the Arctic, that's more than enough. You've made it through another night. Not a comfortable one, not exactly restful, but survivable, which in the Arctic is the highest compliment. The cold has tucked itself into every seam of your clothing, the canvas above you still heavy with snow. But your limbs are all there, and the silence outside tells you that, for now, the weather is holding. You stretch slowly, the kind of stretch that's more about circulation than relief. Your fingers wiggle inside your gloves. You can hear the faint stirring of others, groggy, bundled shapes muttering into frost-stiff bedrolls, trying to decide if they truly want to face another grey day. But no one speaks yet. The stillness is too soft, too sacred. The last remnants of your dream cling to your thoughts. The fireplace, the bird, the strange, quiet blend of home and ice, it fades gently now. You let it go. A spoon clinks. Someone yawns. A dog barks once in the distance, muffled. Morning is beginning to settle over the encampment like a familiar coat, threadbare but dependable. But for just a moment longer, you stay still. You let the cold brush your cheeks. You listen to the canvas breathe with the wind, and you remind yourself, quietly, that you made it through the night. Not just because of your training or your gear, but because you learned how to trade stories, how to barter blankets, how to hear snow, because you remembered to laugh at frozen mustaches and forgive the man who stole your stew. You close your eyes once more, just briefly, and let the Arctic cradle you. Breathe in, breathe out. It's over for now. Sweet dreams.